The next presidential election is days away, with polls showing a very tight race between Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican former President Donald J. Trump. Recent polling by Arizona Christian University shows that 32 million Christians, including as many as 19 million Catholics, may choose not to vote in this year's U.S. elections. How are Catholic voters to view these two candidates when they choose a new commander-in-chief? And what are our obligations to the Republic as Catholic Americans? Here to share his thoughts on the moral concerns regarding voting is the former head of the Vatican's highest court, one of the world's foremost canon lawyers, and author of Moral Questions Regarding Voting. Please welcome back to the program, Cardinal Raymond Burke. Your Eminence, thank you for being with us again.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I want to begin with the principles a Catholic voter should consider when casting his or her ballot. Look, there's been a lot of talk from partisan Catholics suggesting that people shouldn't be single-issue voters, that climate change, immigration, life, capital punishment all constitute a life ethic and therefore mitigate abortion as a preeminent issue. Your Eminence, how would you respond to that?
But of course, we are all concerned about all of these issues, but there are some issues which absolutely have the priority, and those are the fundamental goods of human life, of marriage and the family, and of religious freedom. And we must give our first attention to those issues while also considering the others. But if we don't protect human life from its inception to natural death, if we aren't safeguarding the integrity of marriage and the family, if we're not safeguarding the freedom of religion, then these other issues are not going to be addressed correctly either. And so that's my perspective, and perspective of the Church is that we have to be very attentive to what these so-called non-negotiable matters, and make sure that wherever there's some ray of hope, as I put it in my statement, some good reason to think we can advance the cause of life and the family and religious freedom, that's the kind of candidate we need to support. To not vote at all in a democracy like our own, where there are the two major parties, is basically, first of all, fail in our own duty to try to support a candidate, even if he or she is highly flawed, but at least gives us some hope to advance the cause of life and the family and religious freedom, and not to vote at all. That's not responsible on our part. We have an obligation to vote, and ours is a great nation. And all of us have, at my age, I think of so much gratitude for everything that the United States has meant for me, notwithstanding its faults. And I want, as much as I possibly can, according to my Christian duty, in obedience to the fourth commandment, to do what is for the common good in our nation.
Cardinal Burke, you recently posted Moral Questions Regarding Voting on your website. It's a guide for Catholics voting in the U.S. election next week. And you write this: for Catholics, as for all men and women of goodwill, the question is, in fulfilling our civic duty to vote, how can we be obedient to the law of God written upon our hearts in the present situation of deplorable moral and therefore cultural decline and decay? Your Eminence, in your guide, you emphasize human life, marriage, family, religious freedom, as you just mentioned, as the preeminent issues for the common good, for Catholics to consider as they go into the voting place. How and why should Catholics prioritize those above party allegiance or personality, which seems to govern a lot of the vote today?
Well, we are servants of God, first of all, and being good servants of God, then we are good servants to our country. And if we don't obey God's law, then we're not going to serve well our country. And so these three goods, life, the family, and religion, are written on the human heart. That's how God made us, his he inscribed our law, his law, excuse me, he inscribed his law in our hearts, and we must be obedient to that law. And in that obedience, we serve not only our own good, but the good of our neighbor, the good of the local community, the good of the nation. And so it's as simple as that. And to let some other issue predominate in our minds over these issues is simply not correct.
Your Eminence, Pope Francis himself addressed voting and where American Catholics should cast their vote, advising them to vote, quote, the lesser of two evils. He said this: both are against life, whether it is the one chasing away migrants or the one that kills children. Both are against life. Cardinal Burke, your reaction, and is turning a migrant away at the border equal to killing an unborn child morally?
No, clearly not. To take an innocent and defenseless human life is intrinsically evil. The question about migration is one of prudential judgment. Who is asking to be received into the country, the ability of the country to receive persons who legitimately want to migrate from their homeland to the United States. These are prudential judgments. One can be mistaken in making a judgment about refusing a migrant entry, but it's not an intrinsic evil to refuse a migrant entry. There are all different situations in which people who want to enter this country find themselves, and we, for their own sake and for the good of our nation, have to be attentive to who we receive into the country, and then also our ability to provide a life for them here that will not lead to something immoral or illegal or harmful.
Yeah, Your Eminence, there's also this, I think, wrong understanding that somehow the government has no right, and Catholic teaching provides the government with the right to regulate immigration for the good of its own citizens and to ensure the moral well-being of everybody. I mean, that's part of the common good. And I think this idea, somehow this has gotten into the body politic and into the minds of many Catholics, that if you don't support unfettered immigration with no form, a chaos where people just come into the country willy-nilly, that you're somehow not welcoming the migrant or being, anti-Catholic in some way, or breaking Catholic moral teaching or social teaching.
No, it's very true, and the open immigration without any prudential judgment can change the character of a whole nation. We, having lived in Europe for a number of years, I've seen this in countries that have just received indiscriminately immigrants. It's changing the character of the nation, because some of the people whom they've admitted have come into the country with the intent to use the country to advance their own goals, and not for the good of not for the common good. And so, no, what you say is absolutely true.
Your Eminence, in moral questions regarding voting, you offer some suggestions to Catholics headed to the ballot box. 1, pray and fast for our nation. 2, oppose harmful agendas. 3, study the agenda of each candidate. 4, is there hope that a candidate will pursue the moral law? And 5, vote according to informed conscience. Your Eminence, why is that the recommended progression? Pray, fast, study, and then vote.
Our first inclination, our first Christian inspiration before a situation like our own, which is one of moral and cultural decline and decay, is to pray for the nation, to fast, to do all that we can to build up our own lives in order to be good citizens and to be agents of the transformation of our society and of our culture. Then secondly, we have to make very clear what we know, what our Lord himself teaches us what he's written on our hearts about the good of the nation, that there must be the respect for the inviolable dignity of every human life. There must be respect for the integrity of the human family, and there must be the safeguarding of the freedom to practice religion, and then all the other subordinate issues which may arise. And so we are ardent in our making clear what our stand is in these matters. Then we have to look at each candidate to see, well, who is there some hope? Presently, both for instance, the platforms of the two major political parties in this country are both have gravely morally objectionable content. And so we have to then study each candidate and see, is there one that offers more hope that we can advance the culture of life, the culture of the family, the culture of religion in our society. And if we see that ray of hope, then that's where our conscience will tell us to give our vote. And fundamentally, unless one is convinced that no candidate will advance the common good in any way, would one be justified in not voting at all. But there is a duty to vote as citizens of the nation in order to do our part to advance the good of everyone.
Well, Your Eminence, mindful of what you wrote, and what you wrote is there hope that a candidate will pursue the moral law? I want to play some sound for you. This is Kamala Harris in a recent interview with CBS and then MSNBC, talking about the repeal of Roe v. Wade and her opponent's role in making that happen. Watch.
We have seen extraordinary harm and pain and suffering happen because of what Donald Trump did in intending and effectuating an overturning of Roe v. Wade. Yes, my first priority is to put back in place those protections and to stop this pain and to stop this injustice that is happening around our country.
What concessions would be on the table? Religious exemptions, for example? Is that something that you would consider?
I don't think we should be making concessions when we're talking about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body.
Your Eminence, does that position offer any hope of persuasion on the moral question of abortion in that candidate's platform?
Certainly not. It's a very sad commentary. I'm not here to endorse any candidate, but that kind of statement is completely unacceptable. There's no way that permitting a woman to provide for the killing of the child in her womb is serving the good of that woman, and certainly not the good of the child. And this is and people whose religion teaches them, as ours does, that this is contrary to God's law, something intrinsically evil, to be forced by our government to support and to finance such immoral acts is completely unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Cardinal Burke, the GOP candidate Donald Trump caused much controversy in the pro-life community when he announced his IVF mandate, which I asked him about in a recent interview. Watch. The other day you said, I'm the father of IVF. As you know, some Catholics feel, and the Catholic Church believes, when you implement this technology, you're killing embryos. Will you have a religious exemption to your IVF mandate for religious organizations and businesses that feel this violates my religious principles?
Well, you know, I haven't been asked that, but it sounds to me like a pretty good idea, frankly. But even Catholics, a lot of them, they want IVF. It's fertilization, basically. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they view that as helping a family, helping parents have a child. And it's a very popular thing, but certainly if there's a religious problem, I think people should go with that. I really think they should be able to do that, but we'll look at that.
Your Eminence, how should Catholics view this? Obviously, IVF has all kinds of moral and ethical problems, but your thoughts on at least Trump's openness here to religious exemptions?
Well, in my own experience, I've encountered many devout Catholics who simply do not understand the moral questions involved with in vitro fertilization. And I believe that this is a difficulty in the general population, that many people don't realize what is involved. Certainly to assist a couple to conceive and bring to birth a child according to God's plan for the procreation and education of children is a good thing. But IVF there are these very serious difficulties. I would say from the text that you've and because of these difficulties, a Catholic institution would not be able to cooperate with the procedure. Certainly, from the text that you've quoted to me, it seems to me that there is a willingness to hear the religious objections to, and they really are fundamentally moral objections, which certainly right religion teaches, but it seems that there's an openness to hear and to respect those convictions, which are at the very foundations of one's moral life.
Yeah. Your Eminence, I've heard from a lot of pro-lifers and even pro-life activists complaining this season that this candidate or that is not pro-life enough. They allow too many exemptions, or exceptions rather. But isn't that a failing on the part of the pro-life community and frankly the church, that they haven't been able to sufficiently convert hearts or teach the truth regarding these life issues, and therefore there's no working consensus in the electorate any longer?
Well, certainly we need to give a much stronger witness to the truth about human life, about human sexuality, because there is simply a tremendous amount of either ignorance or people are simply not taking seriously these fundamental issues. And so the work is tremendous. I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of wonderful young families with children. I see a lot of young people, also older people, who are devoting themselves to the promotion of the respect for human life, for the family, for religion. But we need to engage more and more of our fellow citizens in this endeavor to promote the good of the nation. And in that regard, yes, we have to take some responsibility for this. On the other hand, we have to oppose any political power that's using its power to ruthlessly silence any pro-life work or silence the religious conscience, not permit Catholic institutions and individuals to act according to their own conscience. And that, in that regard, I see a great need to raise up in our society politicians who will defend human life, will defend the integrity of human nature as God has created it, will defend the freedom of religion.
Your Eminence, the Synod on Synodality just wrapped in Rome last week, sort of. I mean, the study groups will continue to meet until June. But what do you make of that final document calling for a new synodal version of the Mass and really an ongoing synodal process?
Well, I've been very clear about this from the beginning. No one has been able to define what the meaning of synodality is. This has become a kind of a placeholder for advancing all kinds of ideas about the Church, about the sacred liturgy. The Church's hierarchical communion was taught in the Second Vatican Council. It's clear from our Lord's own example in forming the Church from the very beginning of his public ministry. And so this, while there's a role for consultation and according to the ancient synods, this is not an essential mark of the Church. This is extremely troublesome and dangerous and it needs to be corrected. And now we have these study groups or whatever they're called, and this is going to simply generate more confusion and division to the harm of the church's mission. Mission we've been just talking about. We should be devoting our energy to the proclamation of the truth about human life, about human nature, human sexuality, marriage, the family, the religious freedom. This is what we need to give our attention to. And so I'm praying with all my might that this will be corrected.
Two U.S. cardinals, Your Eminence, Supich and McElroy, have called for the USCCB, the U.S. Bishops' Conference, to revamp its governance in order to reflect this synodal church. What does that even mean? And can we expect lay people, even non-Catholics, to be voting members of a national bishops' conference?
Well, of course not. And people who make these kind of proposals ought to be able to articulate clearly and understandably for the Catholic faithful what this means. Otherwise, this is very dangerous speech.
Your Eminence, we believe it there, Cardinal Raymond Burke. And you can visit Cardinal Burke's website at cardinalburke.com/presentations to read his moral questions regarding voting. It's worth a look. And also, check out his new book, The Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It details the beauty, the history of the shrine and pilgrimage destination in La Crosse, Wisconsin. You can find it at EWTN's catalog at EWTNRC.com. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Thank you, Raymond.